So the question's been asked, when is it that you first had this aha about Fairmount Camp and what it means to the body of Christ? So here's my Fairmount Camp story. My family moved to Gas City from Indianapolis when I was halfway through my 8th grade year. I'd gone to church camp throughout my childhood, but we didn't attend a Wesleyan church in Indianapolis, so I certainly hadn't ever heard of Fairmount Camp. We started attending Eastview Wesleyan Church in Gas City, and so summer rolled around and I was really excited to go to camp. But Fairmount Camp was really different from any other camp I had been to previously. There wasn't a pool, there wasn't a big gym, the dorms were really old, there certainly was no air conditioning, but what they lacked for, they made up in lots of other ways. I quickly fell in love with camp, but that really wasn't the aha. That actually came later. If you've ever been to Fairmount Camp, you quickly notice that there are a bunch of small cabins sprinkled throughout the campgrounds. And I learned that those cabins were owned by different families, and that people that owned them, they came out for events and they attended this thing called family camp. And family camp is where the whole family would get to go to camp together. Right then, God began to plant this seed in my heart. You see, I had a good mom and she loved me and my sister, but we just had a broken family. She was a single mom and it was hard. And there were just so many hurts in my life that I didn't really even know how to have a dream about being whole. But I saw these cabins, and something about these cabins told me that I could have a different future if I could just be one of those families. If I could own a cabin, those cabins represented a different kind of life that was available for me, a life that looked complete, a life that looked different than what I knew as a kid. So now fast forward several years later, I got married, and although for years we didn't attend a Wesleyan church, God eventually called us back to Eastview, and we quickly started attending family camp. The first summer there, my sister and I rented a cabin together, and what I later learned was that God had actually planted the same seed in her heart. We'd never told each other growing up that we wanted to be a cabin family because of what it stood for, but God knew the inner desires of our heart, and He found a way to give us wholeness. We eventually built this fabulous cabin together, and God has used Fairmount Camp in more ways than I can even begin to recount. From the first teen camp that I attended to this midnight encounter at the altar during family camp years later, God called me into full-time ministry. God has been transforming my life on the grounds of Fairmount Camp.